It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
When this dead hand moves, the monster created by a man they called Mad is turned loose to strike terror into the hearts of men. To shock women into uncontrolled hysteria.
Elizabeth!
To prey upon the innocence of children. This is the story you've heard about, talked about. The spine-tingling, blood-chilling story that stuns your emotions. Frankenstein.
Don't touch that!
Horror Hounds, welcome to episode 12 of the Black Sundays Apes Classic Horror. We are carrying on this week with our deep dive into the Universal Monsters Vault, and that, of course, brings us to the one and only Frankenstein. So, Michael, this is one you had seen.
Mm-hmm.
So, what were your thoughts, and when did you first see it?
I didn't see it until, very recently, 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, like 2-3 years ago. There's a theater not too far from where I live. It's a single screen house. It goes back to the silent days. There's an organ in the spot, and they were doing Frankenstein. So I showed up with a buddy of mine, and well, it was it was an interesting night.
Yeah.
There was a lot of like really cool like props, like like a coffin with some shit outside of it was a good experience. You know what I mean?
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
yeah. And then we get inside and we sit in the back because it just feels right. I'm not like always a back of the house person, but it just felt right here.
Yeah.
And we get 5-10 minutes into the movie, and I'm like, wow, this is fucking awesome. This is like, it's just something about like the feel and like everybody, we're all chill, and like there's tiny little kids, there's like really like on in their years people, and we're all just
cool.
kind of here experiencing this thing together.
Yeah, so cool, man.
And then minute 10 or 15, in stroll 4 20-somethings, drunk and loud. And they proceed to eat and talk and answer their phones for the next half an hour. And I was raised very Catholic, from the Midwest. I'm very polite. I can sit on things for a real long time. The only time I'm kind of cool talking is if it's totally appropriate to the film. Like it's a crazy horror movie. I'm like, oh no, oh god, no, ah.
Yeah, of course.
Like,
of course.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
like-
part
like
of the
that's cool.
experience. Yeah.
Otherwise, shut your mouth. And so for me to get to a point where I turned around and politely, but still with this voice, said, "Would you please be quiet? You're being very distracting."
Yeah.
They,
Damn right.
they shut up for a minute. They whispered for a few more, and then they left. And we all got on with the movie.
Man, I just don't understand people, especially in that screening. Like I've had that happen in like teen slasher films, or like teen horror films. You might go and watch a Blumhouse film, a Paranormal Activity or a Happy Death Day. You get some teens up front that are talking and stuff. You kind of expect it a little bit because, it's aimed at a bit of a younger audience. But I don't know, when you're buying a ticket to go and watch Frankenstein in a really old theater,
Yeah.
are you really turning up to chat? Like, what did you think that night was? Like, come on. But in terms of the film, man, what did you what did you think of the film? But also, how does that weigh up to Dracula?
Okay, so this is kind of inarguably the stronger film. Like
Yes.
just kind of front to back.
I don't think
And
anyone's going to argue that.
yeah, not really. And I don't know, just kind of the audacity of the look of the film and the content all combined. And I mean, we'll probably get into it like deeper a little later, but just the way that it was made, causing Karloff to get essentially like an hour of sleep a day,
Yes.
even though it was made in 1931, like it only feels slightly of the time, if you will. Like if you go in knowing it was made in 31 and you give it proper suspension of disbelief, like nobody is that far over the top, you
Yeah,
know
I
what I
agree.
mean?
No, I agree. I think there's some stuff in this that definitely still works today. There's one scene that still works with real shock value that we're getting to it a little bit because there's some really
I might
interesting notes
argue that
around it.
there's two, to be honest with you.
So you said about Dracula, you said about this being arguably the better film. It definitely is the better film. So I think a nice place to really kick off with this is the film we could have got would have been very reminiscent of Dracula, because originally when Universal, off the back of how popular Dracula was becoming, they wanted to quickly put Frankenstein into production and get Frankenstein out. Ended up coming out the same year, so it just goes to show you how quickly they can turn stuff around back then. But
Exactly.
yeah, that was blowing up. There was a lot of buzz around. They knew it was going to be a big hit. It was. It was obviously a smash hit. I believe you said last week it was like the number 6 film of
Yeah.
1931. Right, big hit, big hit. They knew it was going to be a hit, so they were to rush Frankenstein into production next, get Frankenstein out, and on the set of Dracula, they actually first tested Frankenstein with Bela
Yeah.
Lugosi in
Yeah.
the title role. Very different makeup. Apparently, there is some test footage out there. Different director as well. It wasn't James Whale at this point. Apparently, there is some test footage out there. No one's ever seen it because it apparently existed in 1931. It got destroyed in 1931. For years, it's been the holy grail of classic horror fans to try and find this footage. However, there is a image of what Bela Lugosi looked like. So before Universal's Frankenstein, you did have some retellings of Mary Shelley's famous novel, where the character of Frankenstein was interpreted in all different looks, and we're certainly getting to the Jack Pierce look of this film, because that's what is most legendary for, really. But the looks before this had been quite varied. You had monsters that were a lot more grotesque, monsters that were just straight killers, monsters, all across the board. One of the most famous was a play called The Golem, and Bela Lugosi's version of Frankenstein was built to look a lot more like that, and was the way Bela Lugosi was going to play it, apparently, was none of the humanity of the Karloff version. It was just going to be a straight killer, as was later seen in the Hammer films. So
I
I think
actually
that's
haven't seen any of the Hammer films, and I also read that at one point the scale of Lugosi's creature was supposed to be like 30 feet tall or
oh
something
yeah, it was
ridiculous.
meant to be. Yeah, it was meant to be like massive. There is an image somewhere. I don't know if it was an image taken of him in costume. It's like from a poster that they designed, but it just doesn't work the same this way. Like, when
Well,
you've got this, I'm sure if we had got that, it would be different. But when you've got the Karloff, Jack Pierce, James Whale version, it's a non-starter, man. Like no one went to see that. But also on that note, which is quite interesting, is one of the reasons that didn't actually take off is Bela Lugosi didn't want to play Frankenstein. He thought he was too
correct.
good of an actor, and thought he was way too important and way too big of a star to be under the makeup and playing a monster, which, if rumor is to be believed, he then said was his biggest regret, because Frankenstein become as big, if not bigger, than Universal's version of Dracula. So yeah,
I
just
would
goes to
go with
show.
bigger.
Yeah, I would go bigger. I'd definitely go bigger. Definitely the look. Definitely the look. So let's get into that, man. What do you think of the look? Obviously, I'm a huge fan of it. As you know, when we've hanged out in person, I've got a huge
Yeah,
tattoo on my arm of this. So,
there it
obviously
is.
I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, what do you think of the Karloff, Jack Pierce, James Whale version of Frankenstein?
I mean, we could probably do an entire podcast just on the process of that look. But I mean, the shortest version I think I can get out right now is just everything about it came together perfectly. Like the the everybody calls them the bolts on the side of the neck, which is exactly what they are, but people get mad because like, no, those are
Yeah. They're electrodes.
That's the word.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, no, it's one of those like fucking gatekeeper arguments.
There it
Like,
is.
They're not bolts. Yeah. They're not bolts.
But look at them.
They're
They
electrodes.
are.
I mean, like fucking, look, if you've watched the film, that's good enough for me. I ain't gonna fucking lecture you on if they're bolts or electrodes. I mean, come on, fucking hell.
But yeah, the heaviness in the eyelids,
Yes.
the bit of the hands and the feet being distended and larger, which I read was a Karloff beat because he had read that in ancient Egypt, thieves would be bound at the feet and wrist and buried alive. So when they exhumed the bodies, they had very swollen feet and hands.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like just every and I mean I guess okay. To me, like the core of the film is when Frankenstein opens the window, and the monster just like begs for the light, and
Yes.
I don't think that scene works at all, kind of without a lot of the awkward proportions of the
Agreed.
makeup.
Agreed. Yeah.
And fact that those shoes weighed like 15 pounds each.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Like yeah, I don't know, man. Again, I could go on for a heck of a long time about it, but I don't think it can be understated. Like, just this makeup cannot be any more influential. Like, it cannot be understated how influential to this day all the makeup work in everything we're going to be talking about is.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's influential down to the point of view of the look of Frankenstein, but also it can't be understated the techniques that were developed to get there. This isn't,
there you go. That's what I meant.
what Jack Pierce was doing. Like, makeup existed before this, right? You obviously had Lon Chaney in the silent film era, and he would do a lot of stuff. But if you look at what Lon Chaney done, you can kind of see there's a guy underneath what he's adding to that stuff, right? It's amazing what he was doing back then. But Jack Pierce, he took it to a completely new level because he was literally transforming these actors in front of your eyes into something you had never seen before. And what's so incredible about that is you couldn't just go out and buy a makeup kit to do that. There was no school you went to learn to do that. Jack Pierce was making this stuff up on the fly. Like, the Frankenstein makeup was mainly built of cotton and spirit gum. And they it was essentially that brow. The big extended brow was essentially just cotton, spirit gum, more cotton on top, spirit gum on top, and then painted the famous green color
That's why it took so long.
Yeah, it took forever, and it took forever to come back off. And the other problem is Karloff really, really suffered for this role because none of this makeup was tested to be makeup. Like, it wasn't tested if it was okay to put on humans. And a lot of the problem he had with this is when it was on his face for so long, it would dry and it would get really rock hard. It would get heavy, and you touched on the boots and the whole costume and. Karloff really, really suffered to this, to the point of view of after Frankenstein and after The Bride of Frankenstein. He had about 3 back surgeries, I think. He was like damaged for the rest of his life. And because of other stuff he had to do in this film, there's at the end when he's carrying Dr. Frankenstein up the hill and up the windmill. That, he was really carrying Colin Clive. And Colin Clive was like a decent sized dude, like Colin Clive was like 6 foot, 200 pounds. And Boris Karloff had to carry him time and time and time again with all this makeup on. Man, he just got like really, really hurt with it. But despite that, Karloff knew the look that was being created was something special. And Jack Pierce, rightfully so, gets a hell of a lot of credit for this, but it is like very debatable who is responsible for this look. James Wow has gone on record saying it was him. He come up with a look. It was based on sketches he done. A lot of people will say it was Jack Pierce. Jack Pierce actually done an interview where he said it was a real combination. I believe Boris Karloff has said it was a combination of the three of them, which I lean towards, because there's obviously the makeup is definitely built to work with Karloff's face. You know, the one of the most famous aspects is the side of his face where it's really sunken in, and you know, it looks like he has no teeth there, and the reality is he didn't. He had a
Exactly.
Yeah, he had a prosthetic in his mouth, which he would take out, suck his cheek in, and then Jack Pierce would shade it and make it look even deeper than it was. And you know, that was Karloff really putting a lot into this. But yeah, it can't be understated how the success of Frankenstein, that look, not only he's tried to be replicated ever since, and never has. There's no Frankenstein ever that comes close to being as good as this. None. The Robert De Niro one, the Hammers one, none of them come close to this. And then in terms of what Jack Pierce done, and then what he would go on to do, you know, Jack Pierce was the head of the makeup department at Universal at the time. So a lot of these films we're going to talk about, Bride of Frankenstein, Wolfman, these are all Jack Pierce creations. And he, you know, he would go on to pioneer and become the godfather for, you know, people that we grew up loving with makeup. You know, you don't get to a lot of the films we grew up loving with the heavy makeup in the 80s, or the 70s, the 80s and the 90s without first Jack Pierce really putting this stuff on the map, proving that you could do this and make a lot of money doing it. You know, and that's the reality of it, isn't it? In Hollywood, if you don't make any money, it's not going to take off. So we touched on last week with Dracula. I thought one of the most interesting back and forths we had was about the direction or lack of direction, depending on how you want to take it. This film is obviously very different. Like I said, it was conceived with a different director who then left the project. Rumor has it James Whale was given his choice by Universal of about 80 different projects to develop. He picked Frankenstein because he wanted to move away from the war pictures he was known for, and you know, is now only known for horror pictures. So definitely worked. But yeah, I think James Whale was a fantastic director. He is, you know, if we're talking about the influence of Universal Monsters, I mean, the guy is responsible for Frankenstein, Bride, and The Invisible Man. So, you know,
there it is. Yeah.
Right. So
he's more influential about him a lot.
Well, there you go. So he's more influential than any other director in this series. So yeah, what do you think of the direction, man?
I mean, I don't know how Artur theory, I guess, his approach was, but I loved the way that everything about the film played together perfectly. By which I mean, it, you know, like we touched upon, you know, Karloff's performance and makeup, but also Karloff's performance, makeup, and presence within the obtuse angles of the sets. The purposeful pacing of the way a scene's tension will build. I don't know, man. I just there's so much about this movie that is just so good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I'll shut up now.
Well, I think one thing that you've definitely touched on, and I reckon one of the reasons it really speaks to you, is James Whale actually really made his name in England as a theatre director. He was a big theatre guy, and he liked working with those actors too. So everything that he done was very precise, and it was done for maximum impact. So that's why the sets are the way they are. That's why, you know, it said that he was so meticulous that he had to ensure that every shadow was in the right place before he would let them roll camera.
That's awesome.
Right.
And it actually makes sense, especially that one, I mean, it's probably a famous shot. I don't know how, but the, where is it right? Is it the introduction to the monster where he cast that shadow, like just so perfectly crisp behind him on the wall?
Oh yeah. As he's entering the room. Yeah. As he's entering the room. Yeah. And that, like, I always find that scene great because they don't want to reveal the monster until like he's ready for the close-up, as you would say.
Exactly.
So he kind of walks in backwards, which
I found that very interesting. I took it out. I was like, how interesting that he comes in backwards.
Yeah, he comes in backwards. Yeah, but then I think it also works for the character because, you know, he's like a couple of hours or a couple of days old at that point, so he's just trying to find his way around, right? He doesn't really know how he's meant to be moving, how he's meant to be walking. So yeah, I think he's a child. He's a child at the end of the day. So I think that the way he comes in, is really great. But that was all James Whale. That was all James Whale's direction. And yeah, he was an incredible director. He kind of troubled in certain ways. So he put a lot of himself into the characters he directed, and I think that definitely shows in Frankenstein. You can see it somewhat in Invisible Man. You can see it in Bride as well. But yeah, guy was absolutely incredible, and yeah, probably one of the most influential directors for me. Yeah,
I'm really
absolutely.
glad that we're gonna be doing more of his work then, because I didn't have enough time to really do as much research specifically on him as I would have liked.
Of course, yeah, of course, man. But yeah, we're definitely going to dive into him very, very soon. So another thing I want to touch on is you said about those sets. So
Yeah.
one of the things I thought really interesting is, and I want to give a little shout out here to one of our listeners who engages with every week, Kimberly.
Yeah. How's it going?
So a few weeks back, I said that you don't get to Tim Burton without first having Mario Bava on our Black Sunday episode. And one of the things Kimberly come out and said to us was she didn't realize how influenced Tim Burton was on classic cinema. And I said, when we go down this rabbit hole and we start looking at stuff, you're going to start to notice a lot of stuff where directors have taken from that. And you know, I want to say off top, I don't think there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. I don't feel Tim Burton has stole this stuff without credit. I feel just a lot of the people that are into his work are not into classic horror as such, so, or into old Italian horror as such, so like the two don't mix. But just as in, he's taken a lot from Mario Bava in my eyes. The windmill set from this, if you look at the crooked walls and the white
Oh my
lines,
god, I never put that together. I'm so sorry.
is straight Tim Burton.
Jesus,
That is Tim Burton, right? That is Tim, right? Right.
Oh my
That is
god.
Tim. That is Tim Burton.
Yeah.
That is Tim Burton so much that I am now going to set you, Kimberly, and everyone else this challenge. I dare you to go and watch the opening of Edward Scissorhands when Vincent Price's character is creating Edward, and that laboratory is not straight taken from Frankenstein.
Well, and just the angle of the staircase that they use a couple times that
The
people are
staircase,
going up.
the angle of the walls,
Yeah,
everything's off center.
all that
Everything's
shit.
off center.
Yeah, that forced perspective window after
There
they're
you go.
dragging the knocked out
There you go.
monster, man. Like, come on.
There you go. So, you know, you brought up the sets. I thought we have to bring that up. We have to say about that. It's going to come up a lot.
So, okay, well, as long as we're on the filmmaking of it all, I guess random question real quick. Okay, so one thing I noticed hard in Dracula and less in Frankenstein, but it's still there, is even when there's silence, there's like an audio white noise.
Yes.
And like, I don't even know if you know the answer to this question, bro, but like why is it that like an image that's 100 years old can look incredible, but like the audio can't be cleaned up?
Yeah, so it is there in Dracula. They've just done an incredible job in Dracula of kind of toning down that white noise. But you're gonna get that in a lot of these films, especially pre 1950s. A hell of a lot of these films haven't, and it's just down to the technology. Like cameras, celluloid, which you record your image on, still holds up today. You know, we still use celluloid today. The camera, the machine itself might have changed, but in terms of the celluloid, it hasn't really changed. It's the same. In terms of how we record sound, that is greatly changed. It's all digital now, clean, crisp, as you like. Back then, it was recorded on these massive drums, and by the time you had transported it to the laboratory, it had been beat up and sounded 10 times worse anyway. So, in terms of sound, it's very, very hard to get a decent print. And if you ever watch anything on the restoration of these old films, they'll tell you that is the hardest part of a restoration, is the sound. Purely, and also because a lot of sound gets lost. So, for instance, on Frankenstein, when the film originally came out, there wasn't too many issues with it. Like, people were kind of scared and uproar, but it was like to be expected. And then in the late 30s, it got a re-release, and I believe it was the Catholic Church come after it. And the one line, as you can probably imagine, that didn't go down where the Catholic Church was. Now I know what it feels like to be gods, which was always meant to be God, but for some reason it says gods. Catholic Church.
They covered it with like a thunderclap or something,
yeah,
right?
Well, yeah, they did, and then they completely took it out as well. So there was other versions where I think it was like a later TV version, or I think it got lost for like ages. And there's a later TV version where that shot just disappears. So you have the stuff before it, then you have a jump cut to the stuff after it.
Okay.
And it got completely
weird.
Yeah, and when they first done a restoration of this, it was still missing. They had it, but I think they found the thunderclap version. Tried to clean it up, it wasn't as good as it was. And then I believe on the newish restoration for the Blu-ray box set of the Universal Monsters, they were able to find the original audio tucked away somewhere in a vault, and yeah, they were able to clean it up and fully restore it back to the point of where the legend of what people thought he said was actually wrong. And actually, it turns out he says something slightly different. Basically round about the same thing. But that was that's always an issue, man. Sound is always an issue. So that's why I always say, in terms of filmmaking, whenever someone asks me advice on filmmaking in general, I always say the one thing you can never ever get away with is bad sound, because if the direction isn't great, director's learning. If the actor's not great, actors are learning, couldn't afford better actors. If the picture looks shit, couldn't afford a decent camera, or that could even be a style, right? Like the Blair Witch Project, it sounds like it could be a style. If the sound's bad, you just got bad sound. That's not style. That's not. No one accepts that. No one accepts bad sound. A bad film can be made all the better by good sound. So yeah, sound is so important. But yeah, dude, I'm glad you brought it up, actually. So on that note, on sound, great segue. We're talking about Dracula. These come out the same year, but we're saying about Dracula a couple of years off the back of the Jazz Singer. People were just kind of getting used to going to the pictures to watch talkies. And I feel on Dracula, they were kind of walking a tightrope to see what people would go for. On Frankenstein, they definitely went the other way. It's kind of become legendary now how with Frankenstein, people were hearing stuff in a theatre that they never thought they would hear. The opening, there's been a lot made of the opening graveyard scene where you can hear dirt hitting the coffin.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible. But that was shocking back in the day. That was really shocking. And there's sound all over this, right? There's so much more dialogue. There's so much more sound design, score, everything.
Especially if you're watching it from today's eyes, but it's just the fact exactly that they put a microphone in the coffin, so that's how they got the sound, and you're like, of course that's what they did. But in 1931, no, that was just they figured it out.
Yeah, who exactly? Who would have thought of that, right? Because you don't even think about it. You don't even think about that making a sound, because you're so used to it that you don't realize that you have to, we have to put the mic all the way down there to capture that. Like I was saying, sound was so new. Like actors speaking in films was so new. That's why I touched on James Whale being a theatre director, and one of the reasons why Universal and all the other major studios were turning to England to bring their directors over is they needed to bring directors in that had experience with actors talking, because this wasn't a thing. Like 10 years previous, that wasn't a thing. So that's why all of a sudden in the 30s you get this huge influx of theatre directors given an opportunity, because they needed directors that had that experience with actors. But yeah, man, sound in it, I think the sound in this is absolutely incredible. I think it really lives up to today as well.
I don't know, man. Like kind of everything about it. The only thing that threw me a little bit, like I said, was like that when there should be silence, there's not, because of the snow, if you will. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But but also on the restoration front, so the version that I rented, with the clarity was crazy at times, like with the little girl, like that the lake, you could see clear across to all that mountain. And it was gorgeous,
incredible, wasn't it? Yeah.
But also along those lines, I don't think the print that I saw included her hitting the water. Like I remembered him picking her up and
interesting.
Picking up and throwing, I remembered, but the print I think included the splash, So when that happened
Wow.
this time, I went, "Oh Jesus, really? Okay."
Interesting. See, I didn't realize that you could still get that cut version. I just thought it was the uncut version that was out there now.
Well, when
But
I
yeah,
saw it,
let's
like I said, it
touch
was
on
a
that for a
print.
minute.
It was an actual print. So
Oh, you mean when you saw it at a cinema?
when I saw it at the cinema, which was
Right.
with the first and only time I had seen it before a day or two ago.
Right. And when you rented it a day or two ago, do you see the monster throw the girl into
100% yes. That's what I'm saying.
Right. But in the theater you didn't have that. That's interesting.
I
So
don't
you saw
recall
the
that.
cut version in the
I
theater.
could have. It could have been there,
Yes.
but I don't recall it. Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So really weirdly, when the film, I believe like the re-release in the 30s, that weren't really an issue. I believe it won until TV. That was an issue. And it was a real issue of them. It was an issue of the monster throwing the girl into the lake. However, the far more shocking scene of her being carried by her father down the street was not
That
an
was
issue.
really unsettling.
And it's never, oh man, that was so unsettling. Like, to
I
the point,
took that note. Yeah.
well, this is why I'm saying it still holds up, right? Like I
Yeah.
watched Frankenstein, my girlfriend, and she's never seen Frankenstein before, despite how much I love it. And you know, we've got this huge poster in our flat and stuff. She's just never seen it. She's not really into older films. Like she's starting to get into them. She's starting to watch them a little bit
Same
as
here,
I go through them. Yeah, exactly, right. And when the girl gets thrown in the lake, my girlfriend laughed, and it is quite a funny scene, right? Because he just picks her up and throws her in, and it's meant to be quite comical, and you're not you're not meant to think, oh, she's going to drown at that point.
Right.
But then when it cuts later on to her dad carrying her down the road, like my girlfriend audibly gasped at that moment and was like, what? Yeah. Like that was a really shocking moment. Now, can you imagine if that moment is shocking for someone who isn't so much into old films, but is completely desensitized by modern cinema, yet that still works on a very shocking level. Imagine what they'd done to people in 1931.
Seriously, how many people back then was this their first movie?
Right, exactly. And they see a dead, and like you don't see that scene for a little bit. He is carrying her down that road
for a while,
a long time.
It's very uncomfortable.
Man, like that was crazy. And also on that note, just as an interesting bit of trivia, because when you brought up the bit of it being cut, so when it was on TV, and I believe like the early VHS and DVD releases still had that cut. So people that had never seen the original cut of the film before got very, very confused when Frankenstein or the monster is playing with the girl, and then all of a sudden it cuts to her father carrying her dead.
Yeah,
it's like, what the hell happened?
Unsettling. I don't appreciate that. Yeah.
And a lot of people then put that down to like a huge plot hole within the film, was that like, how the hell did this girl die? And there is still a little bit of a plot hole there, because like, how does the dad know she was murdered? Like he wasn't there, he didn't see the monster, and you know, there's a little bit of a plot hole there. But regardless,
suspension of disbelief, just go with it.
Exactly, just go with it. I mean, it's still shocking though. It's unbelievable. Crazy.
Anyway, I don't know. Like again, like I get it if you don't have the ability to contextualize because it's just old to you. Like, cool, come back to it later, bro. Because it's if you can contextualize, it's shocking as hell. I mean, like, okay, because I'm talking about shocking. Like I said, to me, there's two really shocking scenes. His screams as he burns, I was not okay with.
Oh man, they are. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, that ending of the burning of the windmill,
and then the strange tonal shift at the very end.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah, it's very strange. It is very strange. But I think that was more, I don't know, you get that in a few of the older films. I think it's because they don't want to end on the note of the windmill, but you know, they don't want to end on that really horrid image. I don't know.
Right. No, 100%.
Yeah.
No, I get you.
Yeah, I always find the way some of them films end quite funny. But then it's a little bit like how this starts. Did you watch it with did your version have the prologue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The we warned you.
Yeah, so that like
guy?
to me that sets it up to be even more creepy. But in the day, that was meant to soften the blow a little bit. They
Right.
recorded that because they were scared it was going to frighten people too much. But I think it has the opposite effect. I think it builds you up even more.
Oh, I get you. No. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know though. See, I get what you're saying, but I was not around in the 1930s, but I would like to think that based on the way he says that and the smile he has on his face, he's kind of being cheeky.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe
Yeah, I
not
get
so
it.
much builds it up that much.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I understand what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. All right, man. So one of the highlights that we always talk about is you're a huge cinematography fan. I'm a huge cinematography fan. So what do you
Hmm.
think of the look of this film?
I mean, we've already touched upon
We've already
the
touched on it a little
angles of
bit.
it
Yeah.
all, but like there's the camera move when they're like, I think it's just before he starts to carry her through. There's like a nice long camera move through a parade of some type there where everybody's dancing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And like it's a little kind of a subtle thing that you could just hold your cell phone and do yourself right now, but you're like, this is 1931, so how many
Exactly.
movies are even really having moving cameras?
Yeah, and the camera moves in this
Side
quite a
during the
lot.
day.
Yeah, exactly. The camera moves in this quite a bit as
Yeah.
well. There's a lot of there's almost shots that look handheld, like they've got a bit
Yeah.
of shake on him. They've got a bit of just kind of that handheld movement about him, which is very interesting because I
Yeah.
highly doubt that was the way back then.
Well, it was probably just had to do with the way they were trying to even move the
Move
camera. It
the
was just
camera,
on
yeah, because it
something
was so
shaky.
big.
Yeah,
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 because it was
yeah.
so big. Yeah,
But
exactly.
also I talk about camera movement. Like I desperately want to live on that in that house that's just built like proscenium style, so they can go
Yeah,
from room to room.
so they
Like,
can go
oh
from.
my god, this like and like the height of the ceilings. Like there's
Oh
so
yeah,
much
it's
like
all
production.
gorgeous, man. It's built
We
so
could go on for
well.
days about this
Yeah,
movie, man.
we really could. I mean, the kind of you're right. We could say a million things about the cinematography, but in all honesty, I think it speaks for itself for anyone that's seen the film. The only little kind of bit of trivia Arthur on it, which I think is quite interesting, is
Go. Yeah.
Arthur Edison, the cinematographer. He also ends up working with James Wan, the Invisible Man. Doesn't return
Okay.
for Bride of Frankenstein for some reason. I'm not really sure why. But for me, when I first learned this absolutely blew my mind. Is that my two favorite films of all time are Frankenstein and Casablanca, and he was the cinematographer on both.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So how
Nice.
cool is that? That the guy that DOP'd Frankenstein also DOP'd Casablanca.
I mean, just the difference in the tone and the look of those films, and it's the same guy.
Yeah, is that like that? Just shows you talent, right?
Oh, absolutely, man. Like,
Yeah,
oh my God, just like
absolutely incredible.
everything on this film, just to me, works perfectly. Like
Yes,
there are things that feel awkward, but it just has to do with the way that they had to edit it because of the day it came out. You know,
of course. Yeah,
like I
yeah,
think that's the only thing that draws anything back, if you will, is that certain times you're like, what just happened? What?
yeah,
No, we're missing something, and it's because you're totally missing something.
yeah. So is there any? I mean, I've kind of done what I do on a lot of these shows, and I've kind of dropped a lot of the trivia I wanted to bring up throughout the episode. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we kind of wrap up here?
Given how much I loved Renfield, it seems disingenuous to not touch upon how
Oh, of
awesome
course. How can we not?
Renfield is here again.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
he's essentially just playing Renfield
Fritz.
again, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, and again, like this one's definitely more cartoonish than Renfield to me,
Oh, definitely.
but
I completely agree.
it's not outside the realm possibility, because like I absolutely adore how like the put upon like reject gets his bully out the only way that he can,
Yes.
and winds up paying a good little price there for it. So when everybody gathers and Frankenstein is explaining how he's going to bring the monster to life, just the look on Dwight Fry's face as he just like glares at everybody silently, like,
Yeah.
you are about to get so told, you don't
Yeah. Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Like,
I
like
again,
I love it so
The
much.
White Fry is just so good. He pops up in more than just this film as well for the universe films. So keep an
Nice.
eye out. Some of them are uncredited though, so they are smaller roles. But
I looked at his IMDb. A lot of his work is uncredited.
a lot of actors back then were. A lot of actors back then were uncredited. They weren't. This was back in the day where you were either a superstar or you were a nobody. I mean, there are the rumors of. I couldn't find any concrete information on this, but there are rumors that when this film had its world premiere, Universal didn't invite Boris Karloff because he wasn't a big enough star to walk the red carpet.
I
Now,
read this myself.
that is hearsay. I couldn't find anything concrete about that. I haven't seen anything where Boris Karloff's family talk about that, and his daughter is very active in talking about her father's role within this film. So I haven't seen her say that, but yeah, if that is true, and yeah, I could probably believe it was, because back in the day, like I said, you were either a superstar or you were a nobody.
Yeah.
So
Man, and
crazy.
just like he was such a dick. He was such a dick.
Yeah, it's going back to Dwight Fry. That's
I'm sorry. I'm totally sorry. Yeah.
That's the interesting part of Dwight Fry in this, is it is completely different to Dracula, because in Dracula you feel sorry for Renfield. Renfield is manipulated
He's totally put upon.
and abused, by Dracula. Where in this, Fritz is a complete little asshole and deserves everything that's coming to him. Also, on that note, and one thing that, like, it doesn't matter how many times I see this film, it always blows my mind about how loose they played with fire.
Oh, I know, right?
Right? Like, you would never ever be allowed these days to just have a torch and just wave it in someone's face, and especially when he's got
makeup cotton.
Right. That hair could go up at any minute.
Yeah, for real. But like, okay, but also every time I've watched it, like him specifically, like subtlety and performance is something I just kind of love. So that beat that they take when he's going up the stairs, where he's like looks back, and he just fixes his sock while angrily glaring at the door before he continues.
He's
like
great.
I love that tiny little bit.
That scene you were referring to, where Frankenstein's bride to be, Victor and Baron Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And what I love about that scene is you've got those three. You got Dr. Frankenstein, played by the amazing Colin Clive, and they're like, you're like, right, okay, we've got 4 actors that are taking this very seriously, that are playing very straight characters. Colin Clive a little bit less so, but he is trying to play Frankenstein as straight as possible. And then you've got Dwight Fry just bouncing about all over the place, like having the time of his life. Like, he is having the time of his life. He's like, you guys do you, I'm gonna do me.
There's no way that smile on his face wasn't real.
No, exactly. So good. On that, let's just quickly touch on Colin Clive then, because Colin Clive is incredible in this film. I think he's amazing. He was, I believe, James Whale's first and only pick for the role of Dr. Frankenstein, which, for anyone that's read the book, you will notice the name has changed from Victor to Henry, even though
that shit made me giggle.
Yeah, even though we do have a Victor in this, but it's not Victor Frankenstein, purely because they thought the name Victor wouldn't work back in 1931.
I thought it was like angry.
Yeah, it was too angry for the main character. Yeah, which is crazy. But yeah, I thought Colin Clive was great. James Whale, like I said, I believe it was his first and only choice. Universal were a bit up in the air about it at first, because Colin Clive had a Jekyll and Hyde reputation. He was a heavy drinker.
Okay.
And when he was sober, he was fine. When he was, went and partied out on the streets of LA, he turned into a bit of a Mr. Hyde. But apparently he was great, and James Whale knew exactly how to use him and exactly how to get performance out of him, and that's what you see on screen. So just
some of the stuff that he did was I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like some of the stuff that he did was the most impactful to me. Finish your thought.
I completely agree. No, I completely agree, man. I completely agree. That's exactly where I was going with it. I think his performance is outstanding, and just goes to show, if you've got a director that can rein someone in and, don't lose faith in someone, look what it brings. Like we say about how great Boris Karloff is, how you don't have this film, you don't have this success without Karloff, and his portrayal of Frankenstein, you don't have this film where it's successful without the Jack Pierce makeup, the James Whale direction. Equally, I don't think you have any of that without Colin Clive's Dr. Frankenstein.
100%. I mean, like,
He brings up
everybody knows that the it's live bit.
It's one of the
just
greatest lines in cinema history.
Such a manic build, so well delivered. You are totally right. It's one of the greatest lines of all time.
Yeah, and it's one of the greatest deliveries of all time. Like, that's the thing with whenever we talk about the greatest lines, or they have to come with a delivery as well. You know, you have to have both sides of that. And Colin Clive is incredible, man. I think he's so good, so good.
Oh, absolutely. And just like the self-pity when he is getting Fritz away from the monsters. Oh, come away, Fritz. Leave it alone. Leave it alone.
Yeah.
And it's just and it's not even like stop fucking with it because you're being a dick. It was like, just I fucked up. Can we just ignore this
Right,
thing?
exactly. And like that, that is such powerful acting. It's such powerful direction, because they don't even need to tell you his mind state at that part in that point in time. You just get it. Like, you just get it. You know, yeah, it's incredible, man. Like, Colin Clive, outstanding. Boris Karloff, outstanding. The last, obviously, Dwight Frye, outstanding. The last actor I do want to touch on, she's not given a hell of a lot to do, but May Clark as Elizabeth. Like, she is incredible. Like, I fall in love with her performance a little bit more every time I watch it. She's not given a lot to do, unfortunately, like a lot of women back in the day. But again, incredible. Like, what she does do with this performance.
And the way that she does it is, again, like, I think she was what caused me to take the note, where it was like, she's old timey, but only a very little.
Yeah.
So like, if I'm today, like, she's only a little old timey. Like, how natural did you feel coming off? Anyway, you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I completely get what you say. She is outstanding what she's given to do. She really, really is. And yeah, I think she's absolutely amazing. She really is. So I just wanted to throw a little bit out there for May Clark. And then obviously we've already touched on Maria, the little girl that gets thrown in the thing, but the actress name was Marilyn Harris. And again, you know, she does so well in that little role. She brings so much humanity to Frankenstein in that tiny little scene she has with him. So
my favorite bit of trivia is about her. So everybody involved in the production was terrified that when she saw Karloff in the makeup, she was going to freak out. But as everybody was getting into the cars to go to set that day, she saw Karloff in makeup and ran up and was like, "Can I ride to set with you?"
Yeah.
And apparently in classic Karloff fashion, he just melted and went, "Would you?"
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think
that
really shows in their scene as well. Like, she has no fear whatsoever, and I think looking back on that plays so well, especially
what
because
makes it even more uncomfortable when she starts screaming when he picks her
right,
up.
exactly. You know, especially in terms of the scene, or you know, like the monster doesn't throw her in the water to kill her. He thinks he's playing with her.
Exactly.
He thinks she's going to float like the flowers float.
He's confused why she's not.
Right,
Yeah.
like they're kids. Like, he's a kid too, essentially. So that scene is so important. And then when you weigh that up against the scene where he comes in the bedroom opposite May Clark, and the terror there. So, you know, the difference between the child and the adult, and how the adults react to the monster and how the child reacts to the monster. And then, like you touched on, with Marilyn Harris, she was not terrified in the slightest of Boris Karloff in the makeup. That was actually completely different with May Clark. May Clark was terrified of him in the makeup, so much so.
That's another bit of my favorite trivia. The pinky
go on,
thing.
Man. Go on. Yeah, the pinky thing. Yeah.
Is that what you were about to say? Yeah. The that he she was so uncomfortable with it that the way that Boris Karloff sort of broke the tension was he would wave at her with his pinky finger while he was off camera at all times. So even as creepy and weird as he appeared, it was still like, "Hey, I'm your friend. We're friends. Hi."
Yeah, because she was genuinely terrified of him in that makeup. There's just something really nice there about how children react and how the adults react. And apparently that was very much the way in 1931 when this came out. You know, there was no code back then, so anyone could go and see this film. And kids genuinely sympathized with the monster. Kids went for the monster, where the adults completely rebelled against it. So, yeah, just really interesting. You know, I think that says a hell of a lot about the way we watch these films. And then I think it also speaks to why Frankenstein for all these years has really touched people, is because it does have that. You have a certain reaction to it when you're a kid, you have a certain reaction to it when you're an adult, and the more you go back, the more you identify with the different characters and the monster and Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein himself.
I don't know, man. Just the whole film is just
it's incredible,
top to bottom. So I guess last bit of acting I really want to talk about is I may or may not have watched this film 3 times in the last 48 hours, and the thing that I didn't remember at all from my first viewing that I loved, the discovery of Baron Frankenstein this time to me was just he's so near and dear to my heart.
He's so good.
I love this man so much. He one of my favorite phrases in all of the English language is stuff and nonsense. And so when he busts out stuff and nonsense, I was like, oh my god, yes.
He's so good. When he first turns up to the windmill and
right?
he's just like putting everyone down and get out of my way, and what is this crazy stuff, and it's incredible, man. He's so good. He is so
tell
good.
him to unprepare. I mean, come on, man.
So good. And the actor's name was Frederick Gere. All right, dude. So before we wrap this one up, any little bits of trivia you want to throw out there?
So since the monster is just the monster, it never actually has a name. Although another thing I found interesting was apparently in one draft, the monster was in fact called Adam.
Yeah, well, there apparently in a very early test screening of the film, there was a scene recorded in which he is called Adam. Coming out of that test screening, Universal realized that everyone referenced the monster as Frankenstein. So they got rid of the Adam scene. And despite it being called the monster, it is actually canon. Again, despite what some gatekeepers will tell you, it is canon that the monster is called Frankenstein.
I also read a review from 1931, actually, from December the 5th in the New York Times. And it compared Quasimodo and the monster, but in an oddly sort of like negative fashion, where they were like, where Quasimodo is a creature of sympathy, the monster is a hideous monster. Like the review was actually kind of very negative about how the only people that would be interested in this film are the same people that would go to public hangings.
Yeah, I mean that, unfortunately that's kind of part and parcel of a lot of horror films. They don't get the credit at all. I mean, a lot of the ones we've touched on this podcast that are saying like critically
the more they stay the same.
Exactly. Yeah, critically critics don't get it at all. And then as the years develop, the people that grew up loving them films become critics themselves, and now all of a sudden they're acceptable. So
there it is.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, this very seriously is probably gonna have to be pretty quick on our revisit episode list, but I think that's all the time.
Yeah, dude, I agree. I mean, there's like tons we can touch on this, and the really nice part about this.
Pages of notes.
Yeah, I mean, the nice part about this, man, is we're going to come back with The Bride of Frankenstein in a couple of weeks. So we'll definitely be back to explore more of this world, and it's a world that we definitely got to explore a little bit more. One of my out and out favorites of this is just smile ear to ear for me, if I'm completely honest.
Nice. Yeah,
exactly, man. All right, dude, it's been good.
Absolutely.
So yeah, guys, that wouldn't be possible without you. So yeah, thank you so much. And as always, until next week, Horror Hounds, stay safe.
Yeah, I know we don't say it enough, but genuinely, thank you everybody for taking the time to listen, and take care.
Thank you, guys. Bye.